and welcome to Classical Stuff You Should Know. It's a podcast about classical things that you should know, and I'm not committing to any tagline. That's it. My name is AJ Handenberg. I am a English and rhetoric teacher at Veritas Academy, and I am here with Graham Donaldson.
Say that was about a B minus.
Who also teaches English and rhetoric and has no tact. And Thomas Magby joins us as well.
A+.
And he is a brown noser. So my introduction today, in light of the past two and how glorious those puns were, all I can pray is that I know enough about the intro to give it its due. And that I'm adequate.
That was an adequate.
That was an adequate intro.
That's all that I can pray, is that my intro is good enough.
Hey, let's talk about adequateness.
Okay, so Magby has some stuff for us today. What do you have for us, Magby?
Graham and AJ, leading up to this talk, they keep asking, hey, what are you going to talk about? And they keep saying, I'm talking about Adequatio. And then they go, that doesn't mean anything.
It sounds like a giant squash falling from the sky.
It sounds like a Harry Potter spell.
Harry Potter spell. Yeah, that's good. It is. Is it?
Adequatio.
What is it, like darn clothing? Like it keeps, like it's, if you want to knock a rug out, all the dust out of a rug. Adequatio, poof, and all the dust
flies in the air.
Yep, that's it. That's the end of our podcast, guys. Mm-hmm. That's not it. So on our last podcast, a few things came up that tie in really well with this discussion right now. And I guess I'll kind of start it. I'll start from so you two are both English teachers. So you all read
and
books.
Clearly have an expansive vocabulary.
I'll clarify. This is a Latin word.
Oh,
does that make you feel better?
It makes me feel way better.
Word. That's why answering your question of what are we talking about with a Latin word is not really helpful. But so you all read books in your class with students, and I would guess this happens more in AJ's class, but I don't know. So you hand them a copy of a book and you say, "Hey, read this." Do they come back immediately and say, "This book speaks to my soul"? I flipping love this book.
Nope.
Every book they come across, it's like the joy in their heart is just overflowing.
No, but the dudes in my class usually love all the stabbing.
So Iliad, they love the Iliad.
They love the Iliad and they love the Beowulf and they like ridiculous things in Gilgamesh. But
and then there's a few girls who, when they get Romeo and Juliet, they're like, finally a real man. But then
so they missed the point of the
that's
book.
right. But then by book 4, they're like, Romeo's kind of a creep, and it's like, you got it.
That's good.
But when he's saying, like, she doth teach the torches to burn bright, there's always one that's just like, oh. And then there's always, like, another girl is just like, oh, he's so stupid.
But
and the boys are like, I miss stabbing.
and there's always a boy who's writing down things. He's like, tell girl she burns brighter than headlights.
Good. Yep,
you're like a giant torch.
Somehow it doesn't work as well.
I don't have to use my phone flashlight when I'm around you, girl. If we were ever at a concert, I could just hold you up in the air and wave you around.
That's very beautiful, AJ.
I was going to say, can we write that down? That's speaks to my heart.
And this is why I'm married.
Yeah.
That was an awful high five. I apologize. Right. Okay, so, but what does it mean that, so you two are older than 9th and 10th graders, I believe. Mm-hmm. And you all have high esteem for the books that you teach in your class, I assume. So what's happening there? Why, AJ, why do you love the Iliad and the Odyssey? Donaldson, why do you love Paradise Lost and Romeo and Juliet and all the other stuff you read? What's the difference between those two?
So I like my classics for a few reasons. Reason number one, the stabbing.
Yep. You really identify with the freshmen on that one.
Yeah, I can't disagree with them there.
That's awesome.
Their chapter 5, Diomedes wastes like 100 dudes, and it's great. That's reason number one. And reason number two is, and this is something my freshmen can't know their year, and this is one of the reasons that they...
Should we be putting this on a podcast? Is it?
It's not that they shouldn't know it. It's that there's no way for them to know it.
Sure.
Like they won't trust me. And it's that my books are, it's like the beginning of the conversation that's been happening for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
And without reading these books, you are lost to many other references that come later, right? In Graham's class, like they'll see references to Dante, to Achilles, right? Achilles comes up in Crime and Punishment, and if they don't know who Achilles is, they don't get it. Yeah. Right? And so by themselves, yes, maybe after reading them, you'd be like, why is this important? But then as you jump into classicism, you realize, oh, it's because every other author has read these, and if I don't have that, I cannot converse with the author. Yeah. It's like having the basic lingo for a video game, right? If you start playing CSGO, if you've never played CSGO...
Counter-Strike, Global... I don't know.
Global Offensive?
Okay, there you go, sure.
Something?
Sure.
You know, you can never know what a no-scope is, right? If you've never played that, you never know.
I have no idea what that is.
Well, there's a gun that you can't hit. There's no aiming reticle unless you're looking down the scope. So when you no-scope somebody, it means you hit them without even it's just off the hip. But not playing that game, you could never know.
Yeah.
And that comes up in a bunch of other games. And so every time you hear that, you miss that reference, right? And that's the reason why these books are important. The last reason is because I begin to identify with the archetypal characters, right? These characters are in themselves pictures of even like a collection of people that you can sort of put on them. Like Helen is the beautiful woman who is beset by her beauty. The notion that beauty is a curse typically doesn't occur to high school freshmen, but knowing a lot of beautiful people as I have, it becomes a curse, right? They are hassled constantly.
Two of which are present here.
Wait, hold on, wait.
We're beautiful people.
I was like, come on.
Thomas was like, am I
one of them?
One of those?
I set you up, bees. Come on.
If you're beautiful, you go to the bar and
swing and a miss.
You live in the
bubble.
That's right. Sure.
You guys are hassling you all the time and creepy dudes, and it becomes this horrible thing. And she was there. She got kidnapped. She got abused. She got stolen. She was kidnapped more than once.
Wow.
And she regrets a lot of the things that she did, and her beauty to her is a curse. And Achilles is a young man tied to his fate. You know, Hector is a young man laid low by war. Odysseus is a man that is coming to learn that the things that he dreamed of way in the distant future are not worth what he dreamed, but the thing that is worth it is it's already at home, and he just has to go back to it. Right? So these are archetypes, and the more that I read it, the more I can identify with these characters and see the things that have played out in their lives play out in my own. Yeah. So part of it is interacting with the great conversation and actually getting it on the ground floor. And the other is just the characters sort of becoming a paradigm through which I see the universe.
Yeah, I like that. I especially like that point of that they as freshmen are not capable of appreciating it at the level that you are right now, which we'll come back to later.
For me, it's thinking about, so the books reveal ourselves to ourselves in many ways. So I like going through it and thinking about how the books reveal what human nature is and who we are. So in the last podcast, we just talked about how Milton, one of the big things in the Middle Ages, and Paradise Lost is in many ways kind of like the last book of the Middle Ages, is that we are creatured specifically, and there are contexts and places where we will thrive, and there are contexts and places where we will be anxious and we will not thrive, and we will feel like we're fighting the place that we're planted in. I always tell my kids, like, you know, if you are fighting against your nature, if you're fighting against being a human, because you don't, either because of ignorance, you don't know what it means to be a human, or because you don't like being a human, you don't like the things that you've been called to as a human being, you're going to be like a plant in an environment that you can't thrive. And I always tell them about the plants that die on my balcony. My balcony is a hot place and a dry place because it's in Texas, and it's really high up, and it's surrounded by, you know, the side of our building is metal, so it kind of, a lot of the plants cook like they're in an oven. So I decided to put succulents up there, and even those succulents died. To which my wife told me
you are this horrid palace jailer who's like, take this, Rosemary.
Yeah, so I put the succulents up there, and they all died. To which Amanda said that I was less nurturing than a desert, which
so good.
That hurts. But anyway, the idea being that by reading these books and by going through the sort of madness of Raskolnikov in Paradise Lost, as he's kind of trying to reject all morality, or going through the despair that Adam and Eve feel, or Satan feels from the fall, or going through the fact that love of another person cannot save you in Romeo and Juliet. Just thinking about all of these things, about what it means to be a human being. Or
seeing Dorian Gray think that the things that he does can't, if they don't manifest physically, he's fine to do them, right?
That's right.
He can control what happens to his soul.
So reflect all of those learnings back and use them as lights in your own interior to see where you are sinful, where you are rebellious against where God, against your creatureliness, against your the way that you've been created. So that's, to me, is the books are. It's not therapy, but it is a medicine. Like, I often do think that a good classical school is a hospital of the soul.
But Graham, we moderns have science, and can't we learn about human nature through empirical study?
Just picking us apart.
Aren't the novels basically an inefficient form of? So Stanley Milgram did this awesome study where. Have you all heard this one before? He gets this actor to pretend that he is answering quiz show questions, and then the person who's the subject of this experiment comes in and is asking questions of this person. So the way it works is that whenever the person gets a question wrong, the participant in the study administers a shock. But there's not actually a shock going on. That actor is just pretending that they're getting shocked. The question is how many people will, turn that dial all the way up to the top, and it's the vast majority of people. So I can learn about human nature, that actually there's this like evilness, and there's this evil inside of people. They do wicked things. People are bad. I can learn that from a study instead of reading a book, right?
Our meddling intellect misshapes the beauteous forms of things we murder to dissect.
Would you say more?
Oh, no, it's just there's... that's sort of a heavy-handed answer that Wordsworth gives. But the idea being that dissection or analytical analysis, that's the same thing, analytics, picking things apart, empirical verification, that's only one subsection of knowing something.
And
we've talked about this in the Ratio and Intellectus podcast many, many moons ago, but just that it is, if you want to reduce all that ontology to just empiricism, then you're going to close yourself off. Your universe is going to be what many people think it is, which is cold and empty and material, and consequently, when you can watch that sort of worldview play itself out in character Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment, and see that it does not a happy soul make. Anyway,
I was going to say that science is only descriptive and never prescriptive.
Yeah.
It can tell us
what, but not
qualities of happy people, but not how you should, like why you should do that.
Or should we, or ought we?
Yeah, and there's sometimes when, I feel like a lot of what we're finding out in science is just rediscovery of stuff we've known for forever. Yeah. Like, I could have told you that there are people who would turn that dial all the way up to 10. We've known that we are evil for a long time. That's not new. I didn't have to do an experiment.
No, psychology discovered that. No.
Yeah, and
you can give it a fancy name, though.
Sure.
Yeah, and there's a lot of wisdom that comes from the ancients that we have decided to toss out. Like, we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Like, learning about the tripartite soul it's a great way to think about the ordered human. But what has psychology ever...
Can an MRI, can you point to the tripartite soul in an MRI?
So I was a psychology major at UT, and many of my professors would say that the soul is the brain. And that I think it's a pretty commonly held belief. There is no thing that is the soul.
But that may be true. But pointing out that the innards of the computer exist does not mean that there isn't a good way for a computer to be ordered.
Sure.
Like, just by saying, all that is circuits. Yeah, but it also means that you should probably install Windows and
update it.
Shots
and
fired.
Update it.
I am an Apple user.
We can talk about that. That's a whole episode.
Conversation.
But yeah, it's prescriptive descriptive rather than prescriptive. It's rediscovering stuff, and it can't necessarily tell you what makes for a well-ordered person, right? It's stuff that we've known since Plato.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. Of course, I'm goading you with all these questions. But Graham, you had said that it kind of makes the universe smaller. You referenced materialism, but wouldn't you probably say that most people are functionally materialists?
Most people are functionally materialists, but don't want to follow that all the way down, and so they have some kind of moralistic, deistic therapy that they hold to.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would say everyone's materialist. I'd say, functionally, that's probably true. But they like to say that they believe there's something out there, or there's a greater force, or there's love, even though that's kind of nebulous.
The term, the idea of it gets used a lot in people who are talking about modern Christianity in America is moralistic therapeutic deism, is kind of this smuggled heresy into the church where God is kind of on my side and he's for me and I'm for him and we love each other and he
wants me to do good stuff.
He wants me to do good stuff and he helps me and he makes me feel good and
he's there when I screw up.
And when I feel bad, it's okay because Jesus died for me, but I don't really have to do anything about that because that's already done. That's taken care of. So
the Scripture and the church make no claims upon your actual day-to-day life.
Yeah,
right. There are no imperatives.
And that sort of moralistic therapeutic deism is very ubiquitous.
Yes.
And maybe future podcast. It's a weird time. Anyway.
Good use of heresy too. Man, let's talk about that. We're not going to talk about that. Guys, wouldn't you wish that a book had been published in the 1970s that addressed all of these topics that we're talking about today? And
I've never wished that.
Oh, wait, what? Sorry.
I'm just kidding.
Well, that's the end of our podcast today.
I've never wished for anything but that.
Good, even better. Graham, this one's for you, buddy. So the concept we'll eventually get to is Adequatio, but it's still really funny.
Adequatio!
Every time. Which just means adequateness, which we'll get to later.
Good hit, Harris.
Harry, way to darn that rug.
You're a wizard.
I'm just over here trying to continue the conversation. We're doing the Harry Potter. Sorry.
Why do household chores when you're a wizard? Adequatio, it's easier.
I cannot say the name of this this podcast ever again. So I'm accessing this through a book called A Guide for the Perplexed, which is by E.F. Schumacher. He is getting this from Aquinas and Augustine far before him. This book came out in 1977. When I brought this up with the group, Graham said, "Oh, it's the guy who wrote Small is Beautiful," which is true. It's a book I've never read, but it's definitely the one that Schumacher is better known for.
Yeah, who was Schumacher? What was his deal?
He was an economist. He worked with John Maynard Keynes. Isn't that right? No.
He's a Keynesian.
He is a Keynesian. Fled to England after the rise of Nazism, and I'm absolutely reading from the back of the book. So anyway, he wrote Small is Beautiful, and that's most of what he's known for. But this book, A Guide for the Perplexed, is the one that he was most proud of. On his deathbed, he gave a copy to his daughter and said, "This is what my life has been leading to." This book.
Wow.
It's an incredible read. It's very short. Is the thing I feel like I need to say.
It'd kind of be bad if he was like Small is Beautiful and it was like a 700-page book. People may not take him seriously. Right?
Fair point.
But that is true. No, Small is Beautiful. Doesn't that? It sounds like a dieting book, doesn't it? Like I don't like that. I really don't like that title.
Oh, a dieting book.
A dieting book.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
I just really don't like that name.
Oh, sad.
It's only 100. So Guide for the Perplexed is only 140 pages. And what he goes through in those 140 pages, it's very dense, but it's very worthwhile. We'll be picking up a topic that's kind of halfway through the book, but there's some kind of build up to it that we will probably need to do just so any of this makes sense.
School us, Magby.
Let us be schooled. So when you all are talking, when we talk about materialism, what does materialism say? Like, what does that word mean?
Believing that there is nothing beyond the material of our universe.
Yeah. Sure. So a hard materialism is exactly that, and then a soft materialism would be maybe you don't hold that to your very core, but acting in such a way that you can only know what you can measure, that things are only made up of matter.
Yeah, miracles can't exist because it means an outside force would act upon nature. There are no spirits. There is no God. There are no it is only the matter in the universe.
Yeah,
we are electric meat.
Yeah. So
which would be the coolest band name.
Oh yeah, totally.
Like that. So when it's applied to humans, you'd say that's bogus and not really a good point to make. But there are things that are material. There are things that don't have spirit, right? There are things in this world that are like that. Can you think of a name for those? Like, what are things that have no spirit and are just the material substance?
Like a rock?
Like a rock. The rock is the example that Schumacher uses.
An actual rock, not the rock.
Yep, Dwayne the Rock Johnson.
Yeah. Who is a kind and generous person, I hear. He seems like a nice guy.
Wasn't he the one that was asked if he was going to run for president? Was that The Rock? Or was
I think so.
Yeah.
There's a new movie coming out with The Rock, and it's his family is trapped in a unfinished skyscraper. That's Die Hard. But anyway.
So I've seen the poster for it, because isn't that the one where people were like, his jumping?
Yeah, can he make the jump?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, hopefully he does. Or else it'd be a very short movie. So Graham said rocks, and absolutely, there's this category of things that are just the material, that there is no, there's nothing else to it. And of those things, like, observation and empiricism makes a lot of sense to do. Like if you have a question about the element iron, you should probably bring out a microscope and do some tests on it and like look at that thing to understand cause and effect. Makes for something of that level, it makes a lot of sense to do that. We're looking for these 4 levels of stuff that we can categorize. So what is like one level higher? What is one level more complex than the term he uses is mineral, but rock is a good way of thinking about it. What's one level above a mineral?
Something that grows, like a plant.
How do you do this every time?
I kind of think I know where you're going with this. So.
I was going to say something that is inert but carries information, like a book.
Oh, that's
Right?
interesting.
Wouldn't that be one level higher? Like it isn't just simply inert, and by studying it with a microscope, we can't necessarily like looking at the little letter A isn't going to tell us everything about it.
But that's an artifact that isn't created in nature. That's something that gets derived from, I think, your top category.
From higher up, from human, which will be at the top of this.
Sure.
Yeah.
But that, like, nonetheless, it is an object that exists. And I mean, the criteria wasn't that they had to be
naturally
artifacts.
occurring.
Yeah, but
And there are naturally occurring things that bring coded information.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, DNA?
so I'm saying like the object itself. So the book itself, if no one reads it, it is functionally a rock. It's a paperweight. It does nothing more than that.
Right.
So book would still be at that lower level of mineral, but Graham said it. So plant is that next level up. But what's the difference between a mineral and a plant? There's a
Plants
thing.
grow.
They have a vegetable soul.
That's some people do use that phrase, but I'm wary of using soul.
It means it can grow and
growing is what AJ's answer is.
It grows and reproduces
Yes.
itself.
It's the presence of life.
Yeah.
Is the difference between a rock and a plant. And just based on our last conversation where we found out that none of us know anything about physics, I'm sure someone will have a really good answer to say that, like, well, there is actually technically motion inside of that rock because at the subatomic level all this stuff is happening. But I don't, whatever.
But motion is not the only.
That's right. It's life that we're
thing of life.
talking about. A rock left to its own design will just sit there and not do anything.
Motion under volition.
Whoa.
But do
Right? The plant
carrots
can
wanna grow?
want to move.
Yeah. So volition will be the next level up.
Yeah.
Because the plant, you can put a seed in the ground and it'll grow up. But what's happening there is that it needs water to do that. It can't get its own water. It needs sunlight to grow, and it can't get its own sunlight. So there's a reaction.
But plants
toward
do grow towards the sun.
Yep.
Heliotaxis. There's a word for it.
Yes, but that's different than the next level up.
But it's different than a dog, which
go.
is
Next- so animals-
can go and hunt its own food.
Animal is the next one up. So it's not just so they have a material substance.
The animal soul.
They material. So they share. There's something common between them and mineral. That there's the physicality. There's life, which is what they share in common with a plant.
They can grow.
And then they also have consciousness. They also have the ability to go after a goal. To if I'm a dog and I need food, they can think I need food and go get food. They can think I need water. I can go.
What would the difference be between conscious volition and volition? Because the plant moves towards the sun, like it is needing a thing and it will move toward it.
Yeah.
Where a rock can't do that same thing, but an animal can choose to move forward. Is there a
Stimulus.
word for volition under
stimulus versus motive?
Okay.
Is what Schumacher calls it. So at that lowest level of mineral, you can do stuff so you can kick a rock and you can find out what happens when you kick rocks. So
you stub your toe?
Yep. So you can experience causes with minerals. With plants, you're experiencing stimulus. You can give water, and it does something in reaction to it. It is life. Like
Right.
that is happening. But it's not in the same way of with an animal. So you can put rats in a maze, and they will try and figure out the best way to a piece of cheese, and they can try different paths. The plant wouldn't do that. The plant would just move toward whichever way sun is.
But it'll move towards whichever way sun
So
is.
stimulus versus motive. Okay.
Or consciousness, motive or consciousness. AJ is looking very pensive, and I'm waiting for that question.
Well, I'm probably just misunderstanding botany here, but plants will grow toward a water source even if they have no, like, from my understanding, even if they have no experience of that water. Like, if there is a stream nearby, their roots will grow towards that.
Yeah.
Or it may just be that they send out shoots in every direction, and then the
Some of
ones
them
that
do.
don't
ones that-
find water, they fall off. That's probably more likely.
I have no idea, but I think what you're.
I'm
getting-
probably making this too complicated.
No, there is this very complicated difference between a mineral and a plant, that addition of life. When Schumacher talks about it, he turns them all into equations for no apparent reason. He just calls it X. There's this X thing that exists in plant that we usually call life, but it's complicated, and I agree with that 100%. So we go mineral to plant. plant to animal. So animals have consciousness, and an animal has material, they have life, and then they have consciousness. They can have motive. They can direct themselves towards something. What is a level above animal?
Human. Rational soul.
Pop star.
Pop star. Pop star was the answer I was looking for. I thought you were going to say Pop Tart, which, man, I'm kind of hungry
You
now.
don't think they have volition.
But I'm here to show you.
Yeah. Elf on the Shelf.
This thing's terrifying. I'm sorry.
It doesn't move always, but it moves
It
sometimes.
moves often enough to make me very concerned for my safety.
Do animals feel sad?
Are we derailing? I feel like that's a
No.
derail.
Because I'm wondering, like,
Yes,
this is something.
they can feel pain.
I can tell you they
pain.
absolutely feel sad.
So that's just the thing. Like, oops.
Thinking of, who's the old dog? That
Ginger, when
yeah.
when our dog lost her eyesight, she moped in the middle of the floor for a week.
Yep.
She'd just sit and mope.
Yeah.
It was the saddest
So
thing.
there's just something in the bestial nature that also has
emotions
emotions
Yeah.
that maybe they're not as complex as human emotions, but they have it. And perhaps that's also maybe a difference between plants.
Yeah.
Maybe the carrot doesn't care that it's murdered for your salad.
That's good. That's a great point.
Or it just can't communicate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Versus
that's terrifying.
That is terrifying.
Although the
All
mandrake root
vegetarians are
screams at
murderers.
you when you pull it out of the ground. It's another Harry Potter reference.
Man, that's getting really dark.
Sorry. It will get better, maybe? What is the difference between an animal and a human? What does a human have that an animal does not?
Reason.
Reason's a good one.
Made in God's image.
Made in God's image is a great answer.
I'd say guilt, but I've seen guilty dogs before.
That's good. So what Schumacher adds to human that is not present in animal is self-consciousness. So consciousness is...
So, like, dogs don't feel bad when they're when they have a funny haircut?
They're just, like,
No,
so
they do.
self-conscious. No,
I've
they
seen
do.
some
They
dogs
don't.
that when they get a funny haircut, they are self-conscious.
Yeah,
I think it's the dog never has a moment where he's like, I am alive.
Yeah.
That's it. That is
And
it.
I want to cherish my life.
So the consciousness is so the dog can say, I want water, I'm going to go get water. That's conscious. They're making that choice to go and do that. Self-consciousness is the ability to look at that thought of, I want water. Do I really want water? What is water? What is the nature of, like, whatever? I tend to think that the higher functions of humanity relate to philosophy in some way. And so that's where self-consciousness would come in. I know that is not shared by everyone at this table. But
Oh, no, the higher function is philosophy. I just don't think it's the highest.
And then the highest is pottery. That's the next level. I try. Yeah,
You are mocking me.
I'm not mocking you. Maybe a little bit. Okay, so animals have consciousness, but humans have self-consciousness. They're able to look at what they want and then make judgments on that. That would be self-consciousness. Another word is will. Will is another thing that he looks at and says. So Aquinas talks about this a lot of animals, that like animals have these instincts, and so they can only do their instincts. Dog is hungry, dog get food. Dog is thirsty, dog get water. But humans have more than that. They can think about what they eat. They can think about, I guess, anything. They can second guess anything. Okay, so that is the different. So there's a name for these. He calls it the chain of being. Is this increase from mineral to plant to animal to human? Have you heard this before, Dan?
So it's the mineral soul, the vegetable soul, the animal soul, and the human soul.
Doesn't Plato talk about it?
Plato? I don't know if Plato talks about it, but it was a bigger. We may have talked about it when we talked about the cosmos, the medieval cosmos. Yeah.
There is an order there.
Oh, that's what it is. Yes, C.S. Lewis talks about it.
Yeah. And so what we're getting at with materialism is to say that so there's higher complexity with each level. A mineral is less complicated than a plant, is less complicated than an animal, is less complicated than a human. And so what materialism would say is that there's no difference between, so a human is comparable to, at the most extreme form, a mineral, but most likely you'd say plant, that, there's something called life that exists there. But there's no difference between a plant, animal, and human. They all are fundamentally the same. They all can be studied the same, and you can reach conclusions about them in the same way, namely through empiricism, namely through just study a group of people and see what they do, and then make a statement from there.
Yeah, but I ain't reading no dog books. No dogs wrote a book.
Yep, you tell them. You sure told those dogs. So that sets up. Okay, so those are the increasing level of complexity, which gets us to adequateness, or adequatio. So when students read the books in your classes, or I don't know, think of when's the last time you all went to the symphony?
About 2 weeks ago.
Really?
Yeah.
8th grade?
I was going to say, well, it's going to take a much longer time for me.
We got tickets. We got season tickets this year for the Austin
That's been
Symphony.
good.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's really good.
So when you go to the symphony,
Mm-hmm.
could you describe, like, do you enjoy it?
I always leave saying, I wish I loved this more.
Oh,
Not that I dislike it, but it's that it's the same sort of feeling that I have in any kind of opera or like a big epic poem that I'm reading for the first time. It's the same feeling I had when I read Paradise Lost for the first time, or if I read. I've only read the Aeneid, I think, once or twice.
Mm-hmm.
And when I read it, I always think to myself, to really enjoy this would take a lot more work and it would require a lot more knowledge of the thing than I currently have.
Right.
So, like when I leave, we went to the symphony and we listened to Prokofiev, who is a Russian composer in the war, pre-World War II, post-World War II, Soviet. And I never really heard about him. And when I listened to it, I could tell that Prokofiev is very different than Brahms, very different than Beethoven. And I know they're separated by like 300-400 years with these composers, but I just don't have enough frame of reference to be able to like place them in their historical categories. It's the same thing with art. I don't have enough sort of knowledge to be able to talk about Rembrandt versus, in his era versus the Impressionists in their era. So every time I'm at the symphony, I feel like like I have no taste. Like I feel like this is a delicious meal that I'm just like, I want to put ketchup on it, right? Like that's how I feel.
I think it's a great metaphor for it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good
I was just thinking of funny things to pour ketchup on. It wasn't important.
It's very important.
Like you're at a high, like a
You have
restaurant.
gelato and like, I don't get this.
Maybe at this restaurant where like you probably watch the restaurant on like Chef's Table on Netflix, and you get this plate of like tiny beautiful food, and you're just like, as you put the ketchup
they
on
love
it.
it when that
Yeah,
happens.
exactly.
And you mix all the foods together.
Yeah.
But I think that is the perfect metaphor for what we're talking about today. So, AJ, if you went to the symphony, how would you feel going through it?
I'd feel okay. I played trombone for
So you do
4
have
years in
some-
high school.
Yeah,
I have some
it's
background
impressive
knowledge.
watching people who are good at what they do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
How about imagine you take an elementary school kid, a cousin or something. You go to the symphony with them, and then you walk out and you say, "Hey, what'd you think of this?"
They'd hate it. They probably slept.
And why? Like, why would they hate that? Because they heard this. So the weird thing, they both heard the same note, or you both heard the same notes, but you got a different experience from it than they did. Why?
Because I know more about it.
Yeah.
Because I have an experience of people playing their instruments poorly. I know those few years my little sister was learning violin and insisted on playing in the middle of the house.
Yeah.
Versus people who can actually play violin well. And she can now, but those first few years were a trial. And my first few years playing trombone and what people can really do, and I'm having tried to write music, you end up knowing how difficult it is to write something good. And sometimes it especially helps if you know historically what the song is about, like the 1812 overture and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and so when Schumacher, he talks about the music example, he also talks about the example of a book. So there's in front of me right now, there's what do you call it, crimson, maroon? What color is that? It's a red dictionary that is sitting in front of me. So at one level, what is sitting in front of me is a collection of paper that is leather bound. I don't know what that is. Like at some level, all that is in front of me is the material itself. And that's an accurate thing to say about that, but it's not a complete thing to say about that dictionary sitting in front of me. I can say that I can know about it. I can know that it has definitions inside of it, which a dictionary is actually a bad example because you can't really get. So how about I'm going to pull out the Odyssey. We can all stare at the Odyssey. It's sitting right in front of us. At one level, it's just a collection of pages. That is an accurate thing to say about that. If I were a slightly higher function, I might be able to say that's red on the cover. If I'm a slightly higher function, I can say it's Homer on the cover. The author. It says the letters. It's not a picture of Homer. Would that be funny? This is Homer. And those are all true things to say about it. I can also, if I'm even a step above that, I can read through it and understand the plot of the story that's happening inside of the Odyssey, which is good, but even still not a complete understanding of what's happening inside of that book. There are themes inside of that book, a step above that. And then Mortimer Adler says that this is kind of the highest way of reading is, I think he calls it synthetically. It's where you read across books to say what different authors say about the same thing.
And I think this is where critique and synthesis comes in. And this is one of the reasons I think people have such a hard time with even movie critics not liking a movie that they enjoy. Well, part of it is that the critic has seen way more movies than you,
Right.
and has probably studied film and knows what good editing is versus bad editing versus mediocre editing, and they can say this is a bad film because the ending was too abrupt, the beginning was too long, the cinematography was bad. When you're like, I saw a horse jump over a train, and that was cool.
Or
Like,
when character motivations don't make sense, and you're like, what is she, a space wizard Jedi? And she flies through the broken ship, and my kids think it's amazing, and I think it's the stupidest thing. Or no, sorry.
Shadow was a great movie. Star Wars.
or yeah, where I have beef with some of the, like even a couple of the novels we read senior year, but it's just because there are certain things that I don't like about the writing, but it comes from experience and knowing what makes good writing and good novels and having been widely read, right?
So this is Adequatio. So this is Schumacher opens chapter 4. What enables man to know anything at all about the world around him? Open quote. Knowing demands the organ fitted to the object, said Plotinus, died AD 270. Not knowing demands the organ fitted to the object.
Wait, his name was Plotinus?
Plotinus.
Oh, I was hoping it was Plotness, and he had to be a
Plotinus?
writer.
Plotinus?
That's good.
Plotinus?
Plotinus? I don't know. Do y'all know Plotinus? I don't know anything.
No.
about
Do
it.
not.
So a part of what is happening with the student accessing or reading the book for the first time is that they are not yet fitted to the object. They do not yet have the faculty to be prepared. I mean, maybe I don't. Maybe you disagree with this. Do you disagree with this? Like they're
what?
not, in a sense, they're not ready for the book because it's their first time going through it. It's their first time being introduced to many of the ideas contained in those books.
It makes, yeah, thinking that I want the students to have, like read it twice to read it.
Right. That's exactly right.
But
Even then, it doesn't necessarily do it.
Yeah.
You know, even with the Iliad and Odyssey, like I said, my kids can't know how important they are early, and they probably won't know until they've read it and then read a bunch of other stuff, and they realize it, and then that's when they come back and they think, okay,
it used
now
to
I see the
it
importance.
used to frustrate me when students would come back and they would say things like, I'm learning this thing now. I'm learning, whatever. I've had this experience of knowledge and understanding in college. Man, I wish they taught us this back in high school. And
we did.
yeah, and that's the thing is actually all of that was available to you. Like
Right.
the feast was there. You just thought it was gross.
you didn't have the utensils to eat it.
Yeah.
Right. The soup
And
was there.
so then
you
it
were
stopped,
wielding chopsticks.
Yeah. So then I've stopped sort of taking offense with that because that's just the game. Like that's just a growing up. I mean,
Well, there's that, and there's also that they don't always listen. Like sometimes
Yeah,
they'll be
yeah,
like, "You didn't talk about this," and I was like, "Actually, we talked about it 6 times,
Yeah, yeah.
and in the review, like,
Yeah.
we talked about it. You didn't listen."
But I think that's what it's getting at is that, and the food metaphor is so spot on because it's absolutely everything that is. I'm using the English example because you're English teachers, but what is covered in math, what is covered in science,
bringing it to our level
What,
because we're English teachers.
but this is why I'm talking about books. But like with everything that is being offered in these classes is a feast. It's all fine cuisine. It's all whatever. It's all gelato all the time. I love gelato. That's why I say that. But the problem is more with not having the utensils. It's that it's not. I brought this up yesterday. I was just talking with some people about it, and so I'll make a point eventually about this. So one way of reading Adequatio is that students, and it's not just students, it's me in approaching a book, like I don't have the tools for it. But the other side is like having the will to acquire those tools. I guess that is the thing I wanted to raise, just to ask you all. Like, is it a skill problem of like I'm not ready to read the Odyssey, or is it like I just don't want to read the Odyssey?
So we should just teach critical thinking skills, Thomas? Is that what we should be doing? And that
Hey, I just created a modern.
you just created a modern high school,
Hey,
my
I
friend.
fixed it.
No, I mean, you can't learn, like the skills are byproducts that you learn by going through the thing
book.
with a guide.
Yeah.
As opposed to saying like,
And
I'm
doing
going
it
to
repeatedly.
outside of the experience, I'm going to teach you how to experience the experience and let you go experience it yourself. Doesn't work that way. You need to do the
experience.
thing with a person who appreciates it, and you don't appreciate it, and maybe at first you need to mimic the appreciation that the guide has,
yeah.
and then eventually you will actually appreciate the thing.
Yeah.
And that's that was definitely my experience with art. I did not appreciate or understand art. My wife did. And we went to many museums when we lived in Amsterdam, and then we would travel to different European cities and go to their big old museums where they have all of this amazing art. And I essentially like faked it until I felt it, right? And she was going through these things, and she was pointing out things that I would never have thought about, brush strokes and getting really close and looking at things and talking about the history of it, to the point where I had enough tools to do it myself, but I couldn't have just learned those tools without actually going and realizing that I didn't appreciate it as much as I wanted to. So yeah, it's so I don't think you can do it on a skill level, without going through the books. Yeah.
Like that.
So in many ways, like teaching,
you gotta learn by doing. It's just like I hate to bring it back to pottery, but you can't watch somebody throw a bowl 30 times and then
throw the bowl.
You have to do it. You have to fail for 6 months at doing it. I hear that Japanese potters, they actually, when you're interning with a Japanese potter, they don't let you keep anything for 2 years. Everything you make, they smash and tell you to remake.
That's awesome.
Because it's just not good enough. Like, you're just not there yet, and you need to be able to fail.
Yeah, because I feel like, whatever.
We should just light their essays on fire.
Well, I was going to say, or even like, so when the little kid comes home and has the drawing for you and wants it to go on the refrigerator, what you're actually going to do is
2 years later, cut it up into thousands pieces. What is this sad trash?
Draw it again. I have a beard.
Well,
I expect to see a beard on the next one.
But Thomas, a question's been bubbling in the back of my mind is how is what we're talking about not just another log in the fire that's going to make me a snob?
Oh.
Like, I have taste and you don't.
So great. So
because that is
so
Catherine Ball, if you're listening,
it's a little bit of kerosene on an already roaring flame.
So up to this point, we've just been talking about kind of what this concept is, and so implications of this is what will come next. So again, I just want to say, what is Adequatio?
pew pew.
Yep. What enables man to know anything at all about the world around him? Knowing demands the organ fitted to the object. And that is what Adequatio is developing that capacity. It's developing that, when it says organ, like the senses, developing yourself to be able to know an object. So what are some implications of this? One implication of this is that
We'll be snobby aristocrats?
you could, but so one way to look at it is say, I have better taste, you have worse taste, and that's kind of the end of it. But the way I read Adequatio is that all of our tastes are being developed. It's not even taste, it kind of is being developed and grown over time. And so what is unfair is to look at a freshman and say, your taste is horrible, read better books, because they're being developed. Like, I don't know. It'd be kind of weird if they came in and they were trying to look for a good book that's around here. Ulysses by James Joyce. Like, that would be weird if they came into their freshman year reading that stuff, right?
Or they liked good music.
Yeah, because they're still growing into that.
Yeah.
They need to go through pop punk before they hit something good.
We all did that.
We all did that.
Rough years.
But even if you were to take great music and play it for them, they wouldn't be ready for it. Is more what I'm saying. And so it's smaller steps to get them eventually to good taste in music, good taste in books, good taste in whatever. So I don't know. I think an implication of it also is patience with people as they are growing into that.
And not only that, but I would say patience with certain arts.
Yeah.
Like, on a certain level, if you hate something, it might be that you just don't get it.
Well,
Like, you need to learn something more about it. So if I, like with Moby Dick, first time I read that, man, I hated that book. I hated it so much. And then talking to Catherine Ball, who teaches the book, she gave me some fantastic advice about how to approach it, how to read it, and then second time through, I
love the advice. What was the advice she gave you?
The advice, and this is like, you listener, trust me, this is the way you got to go at Moby Dick, because there are a lot of chapters in there that just do not matter. Like, there's one on the forehead of the whale. There's a couple on carvings of whales.
Most important.
And they just, like, to the story, they don't matter much.
No.
But if you look at the book less like an adventure novel and more like a whaling journey, it's a lot easier. Because on a whaling journey, it's not going to be all fun and waves and, getting paid and getting oil. There's going to be a lot of drudgery days. There's going to be days where you're just sitting on the deck, nothing's happening.
You learn a lot about whales.
You're going to learn a lot about whales.
More than you ever wanted to know.
You're going to learn about random stuff in the boat that doesn't even matter, like how to set up the line for a harpoon when you throw it. You're going to think about things like whale foreheads. Like, it's just going to be a long time, and not everything is going to be completely linear. And if you go at the book like, all right, this is going to be hard, it's going to take some work, I'm going to learn a lot about some stuff I wasn't super stoked about learning, but here we go, then
and it's like a little pageant of an actual whale journey, so you can feel like you've been a whaler when you read this book by having been bored and learn a lot about whales.
Yeah, you can put aside your hunger for the new and enjoy stuff as it comes and pull out the worthwhile pieces of it. Just like on a long family road trip, it's not all going to be awesome, but you can pull out those great little nuggets.
I read Moby Dick this past summer, and I read pretty much all of it in 2 weeks when I was at a cottage with my whole family, my parents, my sister and brother-in-law and their kids. And my days really were, I would read Moby Dick for like 3 hours in the hammock, and then I would go in the canoe and canoe around the lake up in Canada.
Yeah.
Hilarious. I would go in the canoe and like canoe around and just think about like, I know there's no whales in the lake, but just think about like the things he's talking about, water and fish. And I don't know, it was, so to me, yeah, it was that. And there are some times when you're at a cottage for 2 weeks and it's not always fun because sometimes you're bored. And
yeah, and I mean, you got to appreciate the time that the book came out, right?
Yeah.
When people paid a lot of money for the book, they expected to get a lot of book, right? If it was an expensive book, they wanted a lot of pages because it was supposed to be a pastime. And he was actually one of the, like, he had experienced whales. He knew what he was talking about. And so the information coming out, it wasn't like he just misunderstood what was going on. This was the best stuff that there was on whales at the time. So
yeah.
But I think also what you all are talking about is the difference between being an animal and being a human, that it's so easy to open Moby Dick, start reading, and say this is boring, and that be the end of it. That's what an animal would do. They would react to they would react to what's happening.
So in 11th grade, when they come back and they're like, "This is a boring,"
Call 'em
Catherine
out.
can go, "You animals!"
and you could.
Well, the other difference is that no one harvests me for my oil.
There is that. Yeah, that's a good difference between you and whales. But
Cannibals, maybe.
but what humans have that animals don't is will, is self-consciousness. You can say, "I'm bored by this book," but it's worth still reading. And so that experience of boredom is okay. Like that boredom it's a piece of information that you feel a certain way about a book. That is not a comment on the book, it's a comment about you. And having developed self-consciousness allows you to understand that or think about that. So you should feel bored while reading a book, but giving in immediately and then saying, I'm just going to read SparkNotes for the rest of the time in the class is to give into your animal nature. And to say that all I am is my reactions.
So it would be like descending into a barbarous age.
There you go. So Pride, Paradise Lost is like a great metaphor for this, of like, you either can be developing these kind of like higher faculties in yourself of like, yes, I'm bored, but I can get through boredom, or I give into my boredom and I only entertain myself all the time. One will make you a better person, one will make you a worse person. That's just an observation based on Schumacher stuff. There is hope. There is hope to develop to that level of adequateness of the faculties. If Homer was able to compile a book called the Odyssey, if Milton was able to put together a book, Paradise Lost, and if people across time have been able to read it and enjoy it, there's hope for our faculties to be developed to that point, to appreciate it at that same level. I think great questions about, like, does everyone have that same capacity is an interesting question, but I think you all would agree. The problem is rarely capacity, and it's more will. It's more intention. That's my experience.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that.
Yeah, because
and I'd say a prevalent philosophy of, self-righteous, just I don't think there's a word for it, but entertainmentism.
Right.
Like
Yes.
there's, why should I work hard? I can be entertained and be fine.
And again, that is the animal side of a person. So it's not to say that it's bad. It's just to say that there's more to human than just that. So you should be entertained. Like, you should have fun. You shouldn't just be working all the time, willing yourself all the time, because human is made up of all the parts of animal plus will. So you should still, I don't know.
And to add to that hope, there's this idea, you gather strength as you go. I mean, a couple podcasts ago, we were talking about how the brain is a web, and the more that you learn, the more capacity you have to learn.
Right.
And I've been recently enjoying the writings of Churchill, his History of the English-Speaking People. And as I read it, I just love it. I'm enjoying the language and the way that he turns phrase and what he's talking about. And I know that even like 5 years ago, I wouldn't have enjoyed it. But now, 5 years later, I'm enjoying it because I like the content, but also I'm thinking of him as a writer in how I can teach my students to be writers, to write something enjoyable. And so there's this, 5 years ago I was, 29 or whatever. And
Ooh, you old.
And just the idea that you continue to increase the capacity, and when you see that, or you can cast back and think about how far you've gone, it gives you a lot of motivation to continue. Yeah. A 10th grader doesn't have that. A 10th grader can't. I mean, they have a little bit, and they can look back to what they liked in 6th grade and what they like now.
But they've been forced to that place.
But they've been
That's part of growing up.
Whereas the motivation to do it yourself is I kind of think you have less excuses not to when you're older because you can see the change, but then you also don't have the like outside force doing it and making you do it.
Yeah, I've had that same experience, not necessarily with reading Churchill, but definitely with writing. I used to think after the first couple of years of reading exclusively ninth grade essays all year that I was getting worse at writing just because
really?
I hadn't been reading as much good writing, and it was just, I mean, no offense to my ninth graders, but
they're writing ninth grade essays instead
well,
of
and things that haven't gone through an editor and publishing process, right? So I didn't have a feel as much for the prose, and then I worked a little bit more, and I'd been working with writing and teaching my ninth graders writing, and then I went back to some of my college essays, and I was like, wow, this is a train wreck. This has 2 theses. This paper's trying to do 2 different things and not very well. The paragraphs aren't cohesive, and I was like, wow, I actually have come a little ways. And then even recently, having studied some things in, The Immortal Strunk and White, and I'm reading a couple other writing manuals, I don't think I ever would have, by choice, jumped into a writing manual in college. Never.
Right.
Like, I figured I was good enough at writing, and that was fine. I was a good writer.
Yeah.
I look back, and I was not a good writer. Yeah. And now, even though I don't have to, I want to learn how to write an email that's compelling. Yeah. So
that's really good. I think maybe a final practical takeaway of what this is about is the example you just gave a while ago of Catherine Ball talking with you about reading through Moby Dick, because humanity is a shared trait across the 3 of us, across all of our students, across all humans that we interact with. And so to say that you read a book and you found it boring at first is okay. Like, you can identify with that because you probably went through that at some point. But then you can still encourage people to say, that's not the ultimate say on this book. That's not the ultimate way you'll feel about this book. It is not a problem for a reaction to be boredom or confusion or this is really hard. You can identify and say, yes, that is true, but that will change. So, anyway, that is Adequatio.
Cool.
Yeah. Guide for the Perplexed is a really good book. James Shaw is he's a priest, I think. Roman Catholic priest. He did a podcast on the art of manliness, and one of his 4 books of if you think that you care about learning, you should read this book, and it's very, very good. So I encourage you to pick it up.
all right. Thank you, Thomas. So that has been our Classical Stuff You Should Know episode. Does anybody have any quotes they want to give as a commonplace?
Oh, I meant to say this. So, yes. The process of how people, I guess, improve or change in their taste, especially. This is a quote from, of course, A Guide for the Perplexed. One cannot, I say, attain supreme knowledge all at once. Only by a gradual training, a gradual action, a gradual unfolding does one attain perfect knowledge. In what manner? A man comes, moved by confidence. Having come, he joins. Having joined, he listens. Listening, he receives the doctrine. Having received the doctrine, he remembers it. He examines the sense of the things remembered. From examining the sense, the things are approved of. Having approved, desire is born. He ponders. Pondering, he eagerly trains himself. And eagerly training himself, he mentally realizes the highest truth itself, and penetrating it by means of wisdom, he sees.
In the modern vernacular, he gets good.
Yep, gets good. Yep. Is it spelled G-U-D? How do you spell gets good?
G-U-D,
Yeah.
get good. All right. Thank you. This is AJ, Graham, and Bees signing off. Oh, as far as classical stuff we got wrong, well, I screwed up the recording last podcast. So there's always that. Sorry about that, guys. I'm the worst. And
No, you're not.
you can check us out on classicalstuff.net. You can send us emails at classicalstuff@veritasacademy.net. You can tweet at us at CLSSCAL stuff. Is there an at Twitter? That's
I think that's right.
at classical stuff.
Yeah, that's it. Yep.
If you know how to find us, just
Go-
Google,
yeah,
just find
go
us.
there. Yeah.
Figure it out. Use the Google machine. All right. And that draws us to a close. So thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Pew Adequatio. Pew.
Adequatio!
Ba-ba-ba-da-da.
You're a wizard, Harry.
I feel like work in that universe would be so easy
Yep.
because you just use a spell. Like, I got to take my rugs to the darning wizard, and you just line them all and be like, Adequatio, Adequatio, Adequatio,
amazing.
Adequatio, Adequatio. It'd be so easy. Like dry clean. It's easy.
Done.
How does anyone make money in this world?
Asking the hard-hitting questions.
Hard-hitting
Like,
Like
there's
2017.
there's only one job you can have, and that's like selling wands or maybe selling food. Like, those are the only 2 shops in the wizarding world: wands and food.
I feel like you come up with spells. Like, isn't there like a spell
You make new ones?
creation? So it's like an app. There's like an app develop, like a spell developer. Like an app developer.
Yeah, but at a certain point, like, I don't know. It was never clear how much magic could do. Like, can it conjure food? Could you conjure food with it?
I don't know. If you are an expert on Harry Potter lore, email us at classicalstuff@veritasacademy.net.
What if that's the thing we get most of our emails for?
Oh, man. All right, well, thanks again, and we'll see you later.
Bye.